Ever feel like you're just kind of stuck? Like you're going through the motions, trying to make a change, but not really getting anywhere?
Oh, yeah, I've been there.
It's the worst, right? And it can be so frustrating. So I was in this rut, and that's when I decided to pick up Atomic Habits by James Clear.
I've heard good things about that one.
Let me tell you, this book, total game changer. It's all about making small changes that lead to big results.
I can see why that would be appealing.
Hmm.
It's easy to get overwhelmed when you're trying to make a big change all at once.
Right. Like, who hasn't tried to overhaul their entire life on a Monday morning? But Clear's whole thing is that it's not about these massive overnight transformations. It's about those tiny 1% improvements that add up over time.
It's like that saying, Rome wasn't built in a day. It's the small, consistent actions repeated day after day that create lasting change.
Exactly. It's so easy to get caught up in wanting instant gratification, but real change, lasting change, it takes time.
It does. But the good news is, it doesn't have to be overwhelming.
Okay, so give me an example. Because I'll admit, I'm still trying to wrap my head around how these small changes can actually amount to anything significant.
Sure, let's say you want to read more.
Yeah.
Maybe you have a stack of books on your nightstand just begging to be opened, but life gets in the way, right?
Oh, tell me about it. My to-be-read pile is basically a fire hazard at this point.
Right. So instead of putting pressure on yourself to finish a whole book every week, what if you started with just one page a day?
Just one page.
Just one. Because it's not about the quantity. It's about establishing the habit.
I can get behind that.
And the funny thing is, once you make that small commitment, you often find yourself wanting to read more. That one page easily turns into two, then a chapter.
And before you know it, you're flying through books.
Exactly. It's like you're tricking your brain into becoming a reader without even realizing it.
I love that. So it's about shifting your identity, becoming the kind of person who does the thing naturally.
You've got it. And that's actually another key takeaway from Atomic Habits, this idea that lasting change is tied to identity.
So it's not just about doing things differently, it's about changing how you see yourself.
Exactly. It's about becoming the type of person who embodies those habits.
Okay, that's fascinating. So if I'm constantly telling myself, I'm not a morning person.
But then you try to force yourself to wake up an hour early to go for a run.
Exact. Chances are I'm going to hit that snooze button and crawl right back under the covers.
Right, because it goes against your self-image. But if you start to shift that internal narrative, if you start to see yourself as someone who values their health, who enjoys starting the day with a burst of energy,
Then those early morning runs wouldn't feel so impossible.
they become a natural extension of who you are.
I love that. This whole concept of identity-based habits is pretty mind-blowing. Now, speaking of fascinating concepts, Clear also talks about this thing called the habit loop, right?
He does. It's actually quite brilliant when you break it down. It basically boils down habit formation into 4 stages: cue, craving, response, and reward.
Habit loop. It's catchy, I'll give it that.
Sure.
But why is understanding this loop so important? What does it actually do for us?
Well, think of it like this. The habit loop is the code that drives your actions. And once you understand that code,
You can hack it.
exactly, you can manipulate it to your advantage, you can use it to build good habits and break bad ones.
Okay, hacking my habits. Now you've got my attention. How do we actually do this hacking?
This is where it gets really interesting. Claire Noel lays out these 4 simple but incredibly powerful laws of behavior change.
Hmm.
And they all tie back to that habit loop we were just talking about.
Okay, lay it on me. What are these 4 laws? I'm ready to take notes.
All right. Law number 1,
Yeah,
make it obvious. Let's say you want to drink more water throughout the day.
always a good goal.
Right. So instead of keeping a half-empty water bottle tucked away in the back of your fridge, make it impossible to ignore.
Okay, so I should.
Fill up a big, beautiful water bottle and keep it front and center on your desk, the kitchen counter, wherever you spend most of your time.
Out of sight, out of mind, right? I can see how that would make a difference. What's next on the list?
Law number 2 is all about making that new habit as alluring as possible. Make it attractive, something you want to do, not something you have to force yourself to do.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do you make a habit, especially a new one, feel tempting?
Let's say you're trying to make meditation a regular part of your routine.
Oh, I've been meaning to try that.
Right, but every time you sit down to meditate, your brain just wants to scroll through your phone instead.
Ah, it's like you're reading my mind.
So think about what you genuinely enjoy. Find a way to pair it with your new habit.
Okay.
For example, maybe you love listening to podcasts or audiobooks.
I do. Big podcast fan.
Well, tell yourself you can only listen to them while you're meditating.
Ah, I see what you're doing there.
By linking something you already enjoy to this new habit, you're making it that much more appealing.
I love that. It's like sneaking in those veggies with a side of mac and cheese. Okay, what's law number 3?
Law number 3 is all about removing friction, making it as easy as possible to stick with your new habit.
So, are you saying I should just lay out my workout clothes the night before?
Exactly. It might seem simplistic, but you'd be surprised how effective it can be. We often overestimate our ability to be disciplined in the moment.
Oh, trust me, I know.
Clear talks about this 2-minute rule, which basically means breaking down any new habit into a step so tiny it takes no more than 2 minutes to do.
2 minutes. I can definitely commit to 2 minutes of, well, anything really.
Right. And the beautiful thing is, once you've cleared that initial hurdle, you often find yourself wanting to keep going.
Okay, this is blowing my mind. So I'm guessing the final law has to do with rewarding ourselves for sticking with these new habits, right?
You know me too well.
Because who doesn't love a little pat on the back?
That's law number 4 in a nutshell. Make it satisfying.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about the satisfying element.
It's all about tapping into your brain's reward system. When we experience something pleasurable after we do something, our brains, they kind of file that away and want to repeat it.
So we're talking about reinforcing those positive behaviors by associating them with, like, a reward?
Exactly.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice? Are we talking about, like, rewarding ourselves with a shopping spree every time we stick to a new habit?
Not necessarily. Although, hey, if a little retail therapy helps you stay on track, who am I to judge?
Haha, fair enough. But seriously, what are some, let's say, healthier and maybe a little more budget-friendly ways to make those habits extra satisfying?
Well, it really depends on the habit and what motivates you personally. Like, let's say you're trying to cut back on spending.
Always a good one.
Right, so you could set up a dedicated savings account.
Right.
And every time you normally make an impulse purchase, you transfer that money to your savings instead. Then, every time you reach a milestone, you treat yourself to something small but meaningful.
I like that.
Maybe a nice dinner with friends or tickets to a show you've been wanting to see.
Ooh, yes. I'm all about those experiences.
It's about celebrating those small victories along the way. Now, remember how we talked about making good habits obvious and easy? Well, the flip side is to make those bad habits invisible and difficult.
Oh, so like the classic out of sight, out of mind strategy.
Precisely. So if you're trying to cut back on social media, for example, deleting those tempting apps from your phone can be a good first step.
Oh, yeah, I've done that before, and it's amazing how much mental space it frees up. But I have to admit, sometimes it feels like I'm fighting a losing battle against my environment.
You're right to point that out. Clear talks a lot about the power of our environment in shaping our habits.
It's not just about willpower.
Right. It's about setting up our surroundings in a way that supports our desired behaviors.
So it's less about me trying to be a better, more disciplined person, and more about being strategic about the world around me.
You got it. It's like you're an architect designing your ideal environment.
Ooh, I like that.
So, for example, if you're trying to eat healthier, maybe instead of keeping a bowl of candy on the counter.
You replace it with a bowl of fresh fruit.
Exactly.
Oh.
You're not depriving yourself, you're just being mindful of those cues and triggers that can sabotage your best intentions.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, if you're trying to, say, read more, make sure you have a nice, cozy reading nook all set up.
So it's about minimizing the friction associated with good habits and maximizing the friction associated with bad ones.
Exactly. You're basically playing a little mind game with yourself.
I like it. Okay, this is making me think about my own habits in a whole new way. So we've talked about our physical environment, but what about our social environment?
That's a great point. Our social environment plays a huge role in shaping our habits too. Surrounding yourself with people who support your goals and values can make a world of difference.
It's like that quote, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with."
Exactly. If your friends are all about staying up late, but you're trying to become a morning person, that could be a challenge. You might need to adjust your social calendar accordingly.
That makes sense. It's about finding that balance between honoring your own goals and nurturing your relationships.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about the importance of environment, but even when we've set things up for success, there's still this whole consistency thing, right? And I have to be honest, staying motivated is not my strong suit.
Motivation. It's so fickle, isn't it? But here's the thing. Clear is very clear on this point. Real, lasting change isn't about relying on those fleeting bursts of motivation. It's about building systems.
Systems. Okay, tell me more.
It's about creating a structure that supports your habits even when you're not feeling particularly inspired.
Because let's be real, motivation comes and goes.
Exactly. So instead of relying on motivation, you create a system that helps you stay on track no matter what.
Give me an example. How do you actually build a system that supports those habits when you're not feeling it?
Think of it this way. You don't need motivation to brush your teeth every day, right?
True. I've never skipped brushing my teeth because I wasn't feeling motivated.
It's become so ingrained in your routine. It's just something you do.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going for with all of our desired behaviors. We want them to become as automatic as brushing our teeth.
Okay, I like where this is going, but how do we actually get to that point?
Well, Clear talks about this powerful tool called habit stacking.
Mhm.
Basically, the idea is to take a habit you already do consistently, something that takes almost no effort,
Okay, I'm with you.
and then you stack a new habit on top of it.
Habit stacking. So what does that look like in real life?
Let's say you want to start a gratitude practice.
Okay.
You could habit stack it onto your morning coffee routine. So every morning when you're enjoying that first sip of coffee, you also take a moment to reflect on 3 things you're grateful for.
Oh, I love that. It's like you're piggybacking off an existing habit to make it easier to stick with a new one.
Exactly. You're making those positive actions as seamless as possible. And here's the thing. Building these systems, creating these positive feedback loops, it's not about achieving some kind of perfect, effortless existence.
Right, because life is messy.
Exactly. Life is going to throw curveballs no matter what.
Oh, tell me about it.
But the beauty of building these systems is that they act like a safety net, a foundation that helps us bounce back when we inevitably stumble.
Because we all fall off the wagon sometimes. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's okay. It's not about being perfect. It's about being prepared and making it as easy as possible to get back on track.
I love this. This whole systems over goals approach is a game changer. I feel like I've been going about this whole habit thing all wrong.
It's a common misconception. We often get so caught up in the end goal, the destination, that we forget to focus on the journey and, more importantly, build the systems that will get us there.
It's like that saying, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. But in this case, the journey is paved with good habits.
Yes, I love that analogy.
Hmm.
And it's important to remember, Clear isn't saying goals are bad. Goals are important.
Right.
They give us direction, but they're not enough on their own.
It's like having a map but no car to get you there. The systems, the habits, those are the vehicles that actually make it happen.
Precisely. And when you focus on building those systems, the results, they tend to follow naturally.
This has been so eye-opening. I already feel like I'm starting to understand my own habits in a whole new light, both the good and the bad.
That's what's so powerful about Clear's work. He gives us this framework for understanding not just what we do, but why we do it. And once you have that awareness, you can start making real lasting change.
It's like you're finally seeing the matrix. All those little things, they really do add up.
Right. And the best part is it doesn't have to be this big, overwhelming thing.
It's about taking baby steps, right?
Exactly. One step at a time.
Well, this deep dive has been incredible. I feel like I've learned so much. I'm already thinking about my own habits in a whole new light. But before we wrap things up, I always like to end on like a thought-provoking note. So what's one key takeaway, one last nugget of wisdom from Atomic Habits that we can leave our listeners with today?
I think the biggest takeaway for me, the one that's really stuck with me is this. If you want to change your life, you got to start by changing your habits.
It's so simple, but so profound.
Right. It's not about these grand gestures. It's about those small 1% changes that, over time, lead to extraordinary results.
It's like those little things, those seemingly insignificant choices we make each day, they really do have the power to shape our lives.
And I think that's a powerful message. So I would encourage everyone listening to ask themselves, what's one small change, one tiny step you can take today to get closer to becoming the best version of yourself?
Maybe it's swapping out that sugary drink for a glass of water. Or finally tackling that mountain of paperwork on your desk.
Maybe it's committing to reading just one page of a book. Or taking a few minutes to just breathe and be present. It all starts with that one small intentional action.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder those small steps toward big changes. Until next time, happy habit building.